Apple was founded on April 1st, 1976 by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak in Los Altos, California. There was a third co-founder, Ronald Wayne, whom Jobs brought in as a more experienced mentor and manager to help two young entrepreneurs run the business. The first company logo was actually designed by Wayne. In the end, the third co-founder left the company even before it was officially registered, taking with him an $800 check for his share in the company. Apple's first office was Jobs' parents' garage, and the company's first product was Apple I, which was essentially just a motherboard with a processor and limited memory. The product was designed for computer enthusiasts who could assemble their own case, add a keyboard and monitor. The first product could be purchased for $666. Steve Wozniak, the co-founder, manually assembled each kit for customers. While Wozniak was inventing, Jobs was actively trying to find potential investors, convincing them that the personal computer market was about to explode. Eventually, Jobs managed to interest Mike Markkula, who made investments of $250,000 and joined Apple as the third employee, owning 1/3 of the company's shares. Apple was officially registered in 1977. Under Markkula's leadership, he recommended hiring a man named Michael Scott as the company's first president and CEO. At the time, Jobs was too young and undisciplined to fulfill the duties of a CEO. In the same year, the company introduced Apple II, a personal computer designed by Wozniak that was meant to conquer the world. The main competitive advantage of the new product was the VisiCalc application, innovative software for spreadsheets that allowed Apple to outpace market leaders like Tandy and Commodore. Thanks to VisiCalc, Apple was able to start selling computers to corporate clients. By 1978, Apple had a real office with employees and a production line for the Apple II. By the end of the year, Apple was one of the fastest growing companies in the United States, with its products being sold by more than 100 dealers. In 1979, Apple engineers were allowed to visit Park campus for 3 days in exchange for an option to purchase 100,000 shares of Apple at $10 per share. Park was a Xerox laboratory known worldwide for its technological achievements, including the laser printer, mouse, and Ethernet network. In 1980, Apple released the Apple III, a computer aimed at the business audience, which was intended to compete with the products of the growing IBM and Microsoft. Against this backdrop, Apple's profits and size were growing at historical rates. By 1980, the company's net profit exceeded $100 million, and its workforce exceeded 1,000 people. On December 12, 1980, Apple went public, selling about 4.6 million shares at $22 per share. This brought the company more than $100 million and became the largest IPO since Ford Motor Company went public. Visiting the Park laboratory made young Jobs think in a different direction. He was convinced that the future of computing lay in a graphical user interface, similar to what we're accustomed to today. Jobs directed his efforts towards equipping the next generation of Apple computers, Lisa, with a graphical interface, but he was removed from the project due to internal conflicts. Lisa was released in 1983, and its sales were disastrous. It was too expensive and lacked sufficient software support. After this failure, Jobs led the second project, Apple Macintosh, which was promoted as the user-friendly computer. It gained popularity among graphic design professionals who appreciated its interface despite being black and white. However, it was still a very expensive product. Around the same time in 1983, when the first Macintosh was released, Apple got a new CEO, John Sculley. Sculley was the youngest CEO ever of Pepsi. However, Jobs managed to lure Sculley into changing industries with a legendary phrase, "Do you want to sell sugared water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world?" In 1984, Apple released a television commercial that aired during the third quarter of the Super Bowl. The campaign was called 1984, directed by Ridley Scott, and cost the company $1.5 million. The commercial promised that 1984 wouldn't be like 1984 after the release of Apple Macintosh. Around the same time, tensions between Jobs and Bill Gates intensified. Initially, Microsoft diligently worked on developing software for Macintosh, but plans were disrupted in 1983 when Microsoft revealed its plans to develop a graphical user interface called Windows. Macintosh sold well, but not well enough to break IBM's dominance, leading to significant friction between Jobs, who liked to do things his way, and Scully, who wanted stricter control over future products in light of the Lisa disaster and disappointment with the Macintosh computer. It reached a point where Apple's board specifically tasked Scully with taming Jobs. The situation came to a head in 1985 when Jobs tried to stage a coup and overthrow Scully, but Apple's board sided with the current CEO and removed Jobs from managerial duties. Furious, Jobs resigned and founded a new computer company where he had full control. The company was called Next. Steve Wozniak left around the same time in 1985, stating that the company was moving in the wrong direction, and sold most of his shares. With Jobs gone, Scully had complete freedom of action. At first, everything seemed to be going well. In 1991, Apple introduced a PowerBook laptop and the System 7 operating system, which introduced color to the Macintosh operating system and remained in use until OS X was released in 2001. In the 1990s, Apple entered many new markets, but none of them were truly successful. The most famous failure of the 90s was the 1993 Newton MessagePad, which was a direct product of Scully. It literally created the market for personal digital assistants. It cost $700 and could do little more than take notes and track contacts. But Scully's most enduring and costly mistake was his decision to spend a lot of time and money to adapt the System 7 operating system for a completely new IBM Motorola PowerPC microprocessor instead of the dominant Intel processor architecture. At the same time, Microsoft's influence was growing. Mac computers offered excellent but limited software libraries on expensive computers, while Microsoft was selling Windows 3.0 for affordable PCs. After the company didn't make a profit in the first quarter of 1983, Scully resigned. He was replaced by Michael Spindler, a German immigrant who had been working at Apple since 1980. Spindler faced the daunting task of fixing Scully's misguided decision to switch to PowerPC. In 1994, the first Macintosh running on the PowerPC operating system was released. However, Apple's condition continued to deteriorate, while Windows' position strengthened. After failed negotiations for the sale of the company to IBM, Sun Microsystems, and Philips, Apple's board decided to replace Spindler with Gil Amelio in 1996. Amelio's tenure was as troubled as his predecessors. During his leadership, Apple's stock hit a 12-year low. One of the reasons was the sale of 1.5 million Apple shares in a single deal by Jobs himself. Amelio decided to simply buy Jobs' company for $429 million in February 1997 to bring him back to Apple. On July 4th of the same year, Jobs staged a coup in the board of directors and convinced Apple's leadership to appoint him as the interim CEO. A week later, Amelio resigned. In 1997, the famous Apple advertising campaign Think Different, celebrating famous artists, scientists, and musicians, was launched. In the new era under Jobs' leadership, the company improved relations with Microsoft, which invested $150 million in Apple in 1997. A new era in the history of hardware and software development began. Jobs entrusted Johnny Ive with leading the development of the iMac, a versatile computer released in 1998. In 2000, Jobs introduced Mac OS X, based on the operating system from the Next computers, completely abandoning System 7. In the 2000s, Apple released two products that had a significant impact on the industry. In 2001, the iPod was released, surpassing all other MP3 player manufacturers and radically changing how we listen to music. In addition to the iPod, Apple's signature white earphones became a symbol of a certain status. In 2003, the iTunes Store was introduced, a service that allowed users to buy and listen to music on both the player and the computer. In his keynote speech in the Worldwide Developers Conference on June 6, 2005, Jobs announced that Apple would abandon PowerPC processors and Macs would transition to Intel processors. The new MacBook Pro and iMac became the first computers to use Intel Core Duo processors. But Apple's biggest victory came with the introduction of the iPhone in 2007. When it went on sale, customers lined up outside stores in the United States to get their hands on it. In 2008, the company shook the market again, this time with the MacBook Air. Thin, lightweight, and sufficiently autonomous, all in a sturdy aluminum case with the famous hinge that allowed the laptop lid to be opened with one finger. On July 11, 2008, Apple launched the App Store to sell third-party applications for iPhone and iPad Touch. Within a month, 60 million applications were sold in the store, with an average daily sales volume of $1 million. In January 2010, the company released another new device, the iPad. Apple became the first company to mass-produce tablets. In the first years, it managed to capture more than half of the global market share until Chinese manufacturers introduced budget models. Thanks to the iPod, iPhone, and iPad projects, the company significantly improved its financial stability. In the summer of 2011, Apple became the world's most valuable company by market capitalization, and in 2012, it became the most valuable company in history, breaking Microsoft's record from December 1999. In August 2011, Steve Jobs left the company due to health reasons, and in November, the media reported the founder's death. Tim Cook took over as CEO. Continuing innovations in 2013, Apple Park construction began. This grand project of the company's central office will open in 2017. The Central Hall for presentations was named after the company's founder, Steve Jobs Theater. In 2014, the first version of the Apple Watch was released, which soon became the world's most popular smartwatch. At the same time, Apple Pay was introduced, a payment system that allowed people to forget about physical credit cards. Then CarPlay, a car infotainment system, was presented, working in conjunction with the company's mobile devices. In 2015, users gained access to Apple Music, a music streaming service that allowed access to the entire iTunes library under one subscription. A year later, the company introduced its independent product, AirPods, wireless headphones that immediately became one of the best-selling products in their category. It was also announced that 1 billion Apple devices were actively used worldwide. In 2019, Apple introduced its services, Arcade for game subscriptions, News Plus for magazine and news subscriptions, and TV Plus, the company's streaming service. During its annual keynote at WWDC on June 22, 2020, Apple announced that it would switch from Intel processors to its own design. On November 10, 2020, MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, and Mac Mini became the first devices with the Apple M1 processor inside. Over the years, Apple has repeatedly acquired various companies operating in the IT market. Among the largest such deals were the purchases of Next for $430 million, PA Semi for $280 million, Quattro Wireless for $274 million, Siri for $200 million, Nanobit Technologies for approximately $400 to $500 million, Beat Electronics for $3 billion, and others. Today, Apple sells its products through the Apple Store retail network in the United States, Canada, Japan, the United Kingdom, and other countries. It also sells various products through its online stores, Apple Store Online, iTunes Store, and App Store, placing it in the second position among internet retailers after Amazon.